Radical Dems and the deep state and the resistance. Attorney General William Barr, who has been absent for weeks and weeks, telling the Associated Press that the U.S. attorneys and FBI agents who have followed up on complaints of specific voter fraud across the country have produced nothing. To date, we have not seen fraud on a scale, he said, that could have affected a different outcome in the election. For the Attorney General of the United States to make that statement, he is either a liar or a fool or both. He may be perhaps compromised. He may be simply unprincipled, or he may be personally distraught or ill. But in no way can he honestly stand up before the American people and say that the FBI has, with any integrity or intensity, investigated voter fraud in this country and then say it did not amount to anything. Because what we are hearing just from the eyewitnesses in state legislative hearings, forget all of the rest, those eyewitnesses in state legislative hearings across the country tell the truth. And it's a story of election fraud, elections rigged to deny the will of the majority in this country. And we will be taking that up here tonight. At the center of charges of fraud and incompetence is, of course, mail-in voting, but also the voting company, Dominion Voting Systems. In speaking about whether Dominion's machines were programmed to skew election results, Barr says this, quote, "The DHS and DOJ have looked into that, and so far we haven't seen anything to substantiate that," end quote. Just what have Barr and his department and the FBI been looking into? I'd like to know how many FBI agents have looked into Dominion, why the Attorney General's office doesn't tell us who owns the companies, the voting companies that make up 90% of the electorate marketplace for those voting companies. Barr's statements are the first public comments he's made in 40 days. He was spotted at the White House today. He was last seen in public view 22 days ago. The Department of Justice has been absolutely unseen. Their election crimes branch announcing absolutely nothing, despite having 130 election officers in 50 states and territories who do who the hell knows what they do. They don't do much. Those officers have clearly been ignoring the compelling testimony of fellow citizens who testify about voter fraud. Those witnesses all across the country in those battleground states. At a hearing today in Michigan, Republican state legislators heard from Dominion whistleblower Marissa Carone. Here's her description of what happened at Detroit's TCF Center on election night. So what has the DOJ or FBI done about that claim? Melissa Carone says they've done absolutely nothing.
So I did call the FBI on November 5th, and I spoke with a woman for at least 40 minutes. The phone disconnected. She had all my information. She never called me back. I had to call them back. I haven't been contacted back since.
Perhaps the Attorney General is watching here tonight. Maybe he should be paying attention to what he is seeing and hear on this broadcast. The FBI is not to be believed, Mr. Attorney General, and as of right now, neither are you. She was never contacted again, she says, so how can Barr and the Department of Justice say they have no evidence of voter fraud? That's a lie. The Trump campaign responded to Barr this evening, saying this, quote, "With all due respect to the Attorney General, there hasn't been any semblance of a Department of Justice investigation. We have gathered ample evidence of illegal voting in at least 6 states, which they have not examined. We have many witnesses swearing under oath they saw crimes being committed in connection with voter fraud. As far as we know, not a single one has been interviewed by the Department of Justice. The Justice Department also hasn't audited any voting machines or use their subpoena powers to determine the truth. Well, the Department of Justice and the FBI never disappoint, do they? They are politically corrupt to the core. And that is only a small part of what we must as citizens deal with if we are to preserve this republic. Tonight, we have a lineup of guests to take on the day's developments and issues. We're joined this hour by Congressman Jim Jordan. Also with us, Attorney Phil Klein, who brought forth new election fraud witnesses today. We're also joined by Matt Brainard from the Voter Integrity Project. His research has unearthed thousands of fraudulent votes. He has also turned over much of his research to the FBI. And we are also joined by Patrick Kolbeck, Republican Michigan poll watcher. And what he has witnessed, well, it is stunning. We'll take that up. And by the way, he testified not only in Michigan, his home state, but in Arizona, about an apparent digital backdoor in the Dominion voting machines and software. More news from Attorney General Barr today. He appointed U.S. Attorney John Durham to the position of special counsel in order that he would continue his investigation into the origins of Obamagate. But apparently he did this earlier. He's just now announcing it. And furthermore, he's suggesting that he has narrowed the Durham investigation down to Crossfire Hurricane only. The Durham investigation can now proceed no matter who is in the White House. It didn't matter before, did it? The appointment took place on October 19th, but was only announced in a letter today to top Republicans and Democrats, of course, on the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. Durham's investigation started some 568 days ago. It appears it is not over, but I will wager this. It will amount to nothing, because any Department of Justice, any special prosecutor or counsel now who could go this long without unearthing anything of importance to the American people to be presented at least in a report, if not an indictment, is an act of craven insincerity. That's as nicely as I can put it. Returning to the Trump campaign's challenges to the November election, they filed another lawsuit today in Wisconsin. There they allege the abuse of the electoral process. 220,000 absentee ballots are now in question. Among the campaign's charges are that absentee ballot envelopes were changed, altered, that there was a discrepancy between the number of absentee ballots requested and those collected, and that absentee ballots were illegally collected at voter events in Wisconsin. The lawsuit follows the completion of a partial recount in the state. That recount gave the Trump campaign the opportunity to see how Wisconsin's electoral process works and how it was grossly abused. Also in Georgia, state officials there have now opened an investigation into groups allegedly trying to illegally register people to vote ahead of the upcoming Senate runoff elections in January. For the very latest on that, we go to Fox News correspondent Steve Harrigan in Atlanta. Steve.
Lou, Georgia election officials are warning that a number of third-party groups, and they listed several, are attempting to bring in voters from out of state, to register out-of-state voters to vote in Georgia in those key Senate runoff elections, the two of them scheduled for January 5th. Those elections, of course, could determine control of the Senate. They also warn that third-party groups are trying to get college students to change their registration to Georgia in order to vote and then change it back after those January elections. They warn that such illegal voting in Georgia is a felony. In the meantime, more news on those voting machines. By the order of a district federal judge, voting machines in 3 counties in Georgia have been frozen. No data can be wiped or erased from those machines, part of a Republican lawsuit alleging widespread fraud based on those machines. Now, the next step is likely to be a hearing on Friday. We might either see this case dismissed or those voting machines examined by experts. In the meantime, President Trump has kept up his assault on Republican Governor Brian Kemp here in Georgia. In a flag tweet this morning, the president wrote the following: "Do something, Brian Kemp. You allowed your state to be scammed. We must check signatures and count signed envelopes against ballots. Then call off the election. It won't be needed. We will all win." Election officials have tried to make the case they don't think that any of these cases of fraud could change the outcome in Georgia, a win for Biden by more than 12,000 votes. But some Republican lawmakers are cautioning, do not minimize the voting problems in Georgia.
What we have found is that when we asked for the first recount, we found over almost 10,000 votes that were never counted. 3,000 votes went in different areas, went back to the president. That decreased Joe Biden's lead here.
The president will be in Georgia Saturday to campaign for both Republican senators. Lou, back to you.
Thank you. It's sort of interesting they don't think they would alter the outcome of an election that has a margin of just about 12,000. That is stupidity or corruption at its worst. I won't suggest that they're corrupt, but they do have a track record of it, don't they, Steve? There's another question that arises here, and that is very straightforwardly. Has the Attorney General heard about Georgia? Because just based on your reporting here tonight and the ruling by a district court judge, you would think that the Attorney General would want his Justice Department and FBI to be all over the great state of Georgia right now. Any sign of the Attorney General or FBI?
There's been no sign here. The back and forth, though, has been extremely bitter between Georgia election officials and the president. We've heard some press conference today, extremely heated warning from Georgia officials that the rhetoric could incite violence here in Georgia, that it needs to be toned down. Lou?
They're worried about violence now. They don't mind doing violence to the electoral system. They don't mind defeating the will of the majority in the state, but rhetoric is concerning to them, I see. Steve Harrigan, as always, great job of reporting. Thank you. More on the battle for the White House, including Senator Kamala Harris's connection to Dominion. That's right. We'll take that up and more with Congressman Jim Jordan. Much more ahead. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Kamala Harris's personal photographer, we all need one, don't you think? Showing what it's all about to work the American dream. Eric Thompson spent most of his career in photography, even working for the California senator. That's before becoming a software tech for Dominion voting systems in Georgia. In February, Thompson was introduced as Dominion's on-site technician. He was in charge of overseeing vote tabulation in a June primary in Floyd County. During that primary, the same electoral irregularities that occurred Election Day took place, including unexplained so-called glitches, pauses in vote counting, and mysterious late-night ballot dumps. Wow. But that's an interesting coincidence, don't you think? Joining us now is Congressman Jim Jordan. And as he is insisting on electoral integrity around the country, he's finding lots of coincidences himself. Ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, the House Oversight Committee. It is great to have you with us, Congressman. I've got to ask you first.
Yeah.
What do you make of an Attorney General who has been on apparently a 40-day walkabout, mostly at night apparently, unseen by the American people, and then appears to announce that back on October 19th, John Durham became a special counsel, and he's produced absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and in the letter that he sent to us, he said that they've found additional information. I'd like to know what that is. I think it's good that he's named him as special counsel, but like you, I wish he would announce this, frankly, before the election. But I know this relative to the voting issues and what took place on Election Day. I have never seen an election, Lou, where we saw this many crazy things, this many strange things happen. For example, just think about today. Today, 4 weeks after the election, California and New York are still counting ballots. Now, if we sent observers from the United States to any other country holding an election, and 4 weeks after that election they were still counting ballots, we'd tell that country, we go to the UN and say, oh, something's wrong here. We'd threaten not to give any foreign aid to that country, but somehow that's now acceptable in the United States of America. I mean, I've never seen, we got eyewitnesses giving affidavits about problems there. You had what you just talked about, the voting machines being held now in Georgia, being impounded basically in Georgia, making sure nothing gets changed. And then, of course, Lou, you have all the fundamentals. The idea that this president got more votes, 10 million plus more votes than in 2016. No incumbent president has ever lost re-election in 150 years when they increased their vote total. He increased his vote total with Hispanic Americans, African Americans. We won 27 out of 27 toss-up seats in the House of Representatives. We're 5 votes short of being in the majority in the House of Representatives. But somehow, President Trump lost to a guy who would hold an event with six circles and only get 5 people to show up. It makes no sense. So this is why we got to exhaust every possible avenue we can find to get to the truth and figure out what happened.
Are you prepared for the president just to say this is a national crisis, that we've got to stop this, and that, by the way, that the dates of December 8th and December 14th they're simply not equipped to deal with the level of fraud and I think aggression against the heart of our electoral democracy? This cannot be permitted to move forward simply because some people want to hit a date. The American people deserve the truth, and this is lie after lie after lie. And by the way, those lies are now being spewed by the Attorney General of the United States, whether he meant to or he didn't, whether he's a sick man, a compromised man. He's not being a man of principle, and this is a serious, serious matter that we have when the top law enforcement officer in this country is saying he sees no sign of fraud, when I don't want to insult any minor in this country, when anyone, even a man of my age, can look around and see all kinds of evidence and eyewitnesses in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, Arizona, and nothing happens. The Republican Party is part of the problem too, isn't it?
Well, what I think is the American people deserve the truth. And again, all the strange things that took place in this election, we deserve to get to the bottom. They deserve to know what happened. Think about this, Lou. 74 million Americans voted for President Trump. 70% of that number, over 50 million people, 1/3 of the electorate, think this election was fraudulent, think this election was rigged. The very fact that they think that is reason enough to do the most intensive investigation that we can possibly do to figure out exactly what happened. When you have over 50 million people in our great country who think something's not right here, something doesn't smell right, something happened in this election that should not have happened, when that many people think that, we owe it to them to do everything possible to get to the truth. And if it takes a little while, then by golly, it takes a little while. Let's do everything we can to figure out what happened, because there are just far too many questions, far too many eyewitnesses coming forward, willing to go public like the lady you had on earlier who talked to the FBI, far too many people saying something's not right here. Let's figure out what took place.
Yeah, a woman, Linda Lee Tarver, in Michigan. I mean, absolutely. With professorial expertise explaining what is happening in the state of Michigan. And I'm telling you, those state legislators are listening to her. The people who were watching that live streamed, they got a hell of an education. And why is it the networks are not carrying those damn hearings?
Well,
because it's the truth. And those networks have decided that truth is secondary to their interest.
Yeah, the same reason they didn't talk about the Bob Alinsky story, same reason they wouldn't talk about Hunter Biden. I mean, that's who they are. The same reason they didn't carry the hearing that took place in Pennsylvania last week, where we learned all kinds of information. And I was on the phone with some of those Pennsylvania legislators over the weekend who put forward a resolution saying we should slow down and figure out what took place there. So that's what needs to happen. The American people understand that's what needs to happen. So let's just make it. Let's make it so. Let's figure it out. Let's do the investigations that have to be done and get to the truth.
Congressman Jim Jordan, always great to have you on the broadcast. Thanks for all you do. A great American, Jim Jordan. Up next, another whistleblower has come forward alleging mail-in ballot fraud. Are you listening, Attorney General Barr? Attorney Phil Klein represents that whistleblower. He's our guest here next. Right after these quick messages, please stay with us. Wallace is finally speaking out, but he's denying any issues with Dominion machines in this year's election. In a Wall Street Journal op-ed, Polis calls allegations made against Dominion damaging to democracy. Excuse me, well, do you hear the trumpets? I do. And that distant drum roll? Claiming that Dominion is an American company based in Denver and makes no mention of Dominion's Toronto office, that he, a Canadian, owns 12.4% of the company. Complicated, isn't it? Maybe some just straightforward answers. Come on this broadcast, sir, and we'll have a discussion about your company, its reach, its software. And I know it's proprietary, but you can share a lot of it with us. You can trust us. We're Americans too. Michigan's Senate Oversight Committee today holding hearings about issues in the presidential election, like fraud and vote counting in Detroit's Wayne County. Witnesses testified one after another about what they saw.
Not one of the military ballots was a registered voter. And the ballots looked like they were all exactly the same Xerox copies of the ballot. They were all for Biden across the board. There wasn't a single Trump vote, and none of the voters were registered. They had to manually enter the names and addresses and a birth date of 1/1/2020, which would override the system and allow them to enter non-registered voters, of which I saw several that day.
Anytime as a challenger, I tried to look at the ballot and then try to verify it, I would get 2 or 3 of the poll workers literally screaming at me to get back 6 feet.
On November 4th, early in the morning, I was standing at the adjudication table, and a ballot came across the screen. The ballot had a straight party ticket vote for both the Democrat and the Republican. It was a filled-in circle, which is an intentional mark. It's not a dash, it's not a dot. When the ballot came across the screen, there was no other marks. None of the judges and none of the other ballot proposals had been voted on. The poll worker then said, I think I'm going to give it to the Democrats. That's absolutely absurd. That is illegal.
Well, there you have it. Mr. Attorney General, if you're watching, more evidence. Our next guest also testified before Michigan lawmakers today. Joining us now is Patrick Kolbeck, election challenger in Wayne County, Michigan, former state senator. And it's good to have you back with us, Patrick. What I witnessed this afternoon, it was extraordinary. The number of witnesses before that Senate committee talking about fraud, outrageous fraud. And you know what else, Patrick? I believe without exception, every one of those witnesses who was a poll watcher or challenger talked about intimidation by Democrats in that room. And I just want to ask you, could it be that Antifa was running the election for the Democrats in that building? Because it sounded like Antifa tactics.
No, they definitely appeared to have been inspired by Antifa, and that doesn't even include what happened with the Wayne County Board of Canvassers and State Board of Canvassers. It's a rule by intimidation, and I'm so proud of everybody who came up today and testified. There's still people that are being threatened for their testimony, and that should never happen in America.
This doesn't look like America. It just does not look like America. I've covered politics a long time. I have seen instances in certain states, certain counties across the country where there are these kinds of tactics and there is this level of corruption. But to see it broadly across the country, and it is stunning. And particularly, as we all know, in the cities of Philadelphia and Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, this is horrible stuff. Horrible. And people are trying to act like when the president says this is electoral fraud, as if it's some sort of political charge. This goes to the heart of our nation.
Absolutely. And that's what was so heartwarming about the testimonies today, Lou. I mean, this is all kinds of folks just stepping up. And the testimonies that they gave were very credible tangible examples of election fraud that were happening. They weren't just sitting there stealing the limelight to talk to the Senate committee. They provided tangible examples, and it was compelling. Right. I think we actually moved the needle with the senators that were part of that committee. And there's a lot of good things happening here in the state of Michigan, I think, because now we're finally getting an opportunity to talk about that fraud. For too long, they said that there is no evidence of fraud. You can't deny that there's evidence. And the Sidney Powell lawsuit documents that in 75 pages as well, the significant evidence that there was significant election fraud. And Lou, I'm telling you, for the first time in a long time, I'm seeing the needle moved. I'm seeing the legislators starting to get it. And the light bulb's going on, and I'm seeing signs of life. It's really encouraging to me.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because you've been through a lot. And I don't think you were ever dispirited, but I've never seen you this uplifted, I'll put it that way. And that is good to see. My spirits were lifted by a woman who I'd never watched on television before. And that was Linda, I believe her name is Linda Lee Tarver, Republican
she's a prayer
woman for Trump.
Yeah.
She is, and she is one of the brightest and most knowledgeable people on elections. And for her to talk about the 71% that we will never see those ballots in the state of Michigan, because those are in predominantly African-American parts of the state, where those ballots in those boxes, as she put it, will just never see the light of day, because everyone is afraid to be called racist if they would even intimate that there could be anything wrong with those ballots. Your thoughts?
Well, testimony after testimony echoed Linda Lee Tarver's words. Christina Karamos, Artisha Bomer, Jasmine Early, the folks that are speaking up are just tired of having their voices censored by the media.
Right. Patrick, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it, and thank you for doing all that you are. Patrick Kolbeck. We're coming right back. Stay with us. Alleging electoral fraud in 3 battleground states. One is a U.S. Postal Service contractor who says he witnessed between 144 and 288,000 completed ballots being shipped across state lines on October 21st. Another contractor saying thousands of late mail-in ballots were being backdated to Election Day so they could be counted. Well, joining us now is Attorney Phil Klein. He's the director of the Amistad Project, former Attorney General of Kansas and a great American. Phil, it's great to have you with us. Let's start with whistleblowers on on all of those ballots before the election. How important is that testimony?
Well, it's hugely significant because there's absolutely no reason for ballots to be counted in Pennsylvania to be shipped from New York. So what he experienced is, and we believe through our evidence, that they loaded the wrong truck. They intended to load a different truck. But he's up there in New York at a postal facility that doesn't even process mail. In other words, they don't have the equipment, they don't have any intake. There's no reason for these bulk ballots as bulk mail in these bulk carriers put into these boxes to even be at this facility. And they load them up in his truck and they tell him to go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He drives down there, and typically the Postal Service is very efficient. They unload, they move you to the next stop. He waits in that parking lot for 6 hours without orders, and then they order him to Lancaster without unloading. What we believe happened is those ballots weren't supposed to be there, and they couldn't open that truck to let other people see what is inside the truck, which were completed ballots ready to be counted. And then another whistleblower later on election night, actually November 4th in the morning, sees the same type of bins of ballots coming in a late night ballot dump to be voted and counted in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. So yes, this is deeply concerning. We've been investigating this now for several weeks. We've corroborated the story. We have corroborated with witness at that postal facility that ballots were being shipped, completed to Pennsylvania on several different at several different times. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of ballots. And Lou, this evidence is available to us if we just ask the right people and demand answers. There's cameras at postal facilities. There's GPS tracking of those trucks. They have barcodes on seals on the trucks. There's all kinds of ways, if America wants to learn the truth and has the guts to face it, to dig this story out.
Well, I've already said that William Barr, the Attorney General, is a liar because of his statements today. He's also a liar because he took an oath and he is not fulfilling that oath. Your thoughts about an Attorney General, a Justice Department, electoral crimes units, all sorts of people working in them, the FBI hearing these complaints and doing nothing. Who in the world are they working for now? Because they're not the ones doing the legwork that you and your project have been doing. This is straightforward. The evidence of fraud is almost everywhere.
I would say that it is as well, Lou, and I think the Attorney General merely answered the wrong question. I don't want to call into question what he said, but the media always asks this question. Have you seen fraud sufficient enough to overturn the election? Well, I'll tell you what. We've seen fraud sufficient enough that says we must investigate, and the evidence is in the ballots. We need to seize those ballots, and we can determine whether they were fraudulently cast. So it could have been very easily the Attorney General answering a question when really the right question is, has there been evidence of fraud? Yes. Should it be investigated? Absolutely. And what is the next step in the investigation? It's getting those election officials who refuse to let us inside the doors to bust down those doors and grab those ballots and do the analysis on the ballots. So that's the right question, and I hope the Attorney General believes that as well. I don't know that he does not.
The Attorney General is a smart man by all accounts. Not smart enough to be honest, but a smart man. It would be akin, the nice way in which you were excusing him, it would be like saying only steal $900 from each person. That way you won't have grand theft over $1,000, and you can make quite a bit of money that way, couldn't you? The fact of the matter is that this is a crisis in our nation. We know that this is wrong. We know that the American people have been assaulted, maybe even by foreign entities at work in this as well as the radical Dems and the deep state. But we do know this. We have as a nation been violated. The electoral system that is supposed to work has been absolutely defaced by this scum who have decided to steal this election. What should we do now?
Well, we need to demand investigations and demand answers, and it has to happen quick, because what happens after every crime is they start cleaning up the evidence of the crime. And it has happened in all these urban centers with blue state officials where they radically altered the nature of the election.
Okay, so what should we do? We can't even get the Attorney General to acknowledge that a crime has been committed or may have been committed, or that he would use his precious resources in the political arm of the Democratic Party, that is the FBI, to investigate. What can the president do? What power can be brought forward? Is it the Supreme Court? Is it the White House? What must be done?
The Supreme Court can act to reverse this. There's strong evidence of a violation of equal protection in these blue states, and that needs to be brought forth to the court, and they need to act. Legislators can vote not to certify an election. And the question is not whether there's evidence of fraud to overturn it. The question is, do you believe we can have faith in this election? And I know every one of those in that seat that has looked at this has to answer no. We can't have faith. We can't certify.
Phil Klein, good to have you with us. Come back soon and keep up the great work. Thanks so much. Phil Klein, a great American. Up next, more on the battle for the White House and the electoral fraud that has overwhelmed this country. Our next guest is Matt Brainard, head of the Voter Integrity Project. Stay with us. We'll be right back with him. The strategist, Matt Brainard, His voter integrity project surveyed tens of thousands of voters in battleground states, many of whom said they never requested nor received mail-in ballots that were ultimately cast in their name. Joining us now is the man who compiled the data, Matt Brainard, founder of the Voter Integrity Project. Matt, great to have you with us. Let's start with the FBI, because as you may have heard on this broadcast, I'm not in the least pleased with the FBI or the head of the Justice Department. Tell us what you gave them that you think may be most helpful to them to assure integrity in this election.
Well, what we're giving them is we're giving to every of our target states attorney generals, the legislatures, governors, and secretaries of state is hard evidence of potentially illegal ballots cast in those states. And I'm not sending them charts or line graphs or speculation about what may or may not have happened. I'm sending them the names, addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth, and voter record numbers of people who either had ballots cast in their name and said they didn't, or who did cast ballots they shouldn't have because they didn't meet residency requirements, or cast ballots in multiple states. And what we found is in several key states, specifically Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona, the number of these ballots, individual voters that we've identified who cast early and absentee ballots in these states, surpassed the margin of victory, which means that nobody can honestly say for certain that Joe Biden actually won the election, just on the basis of our data alone. Now, other people have done other analyses, which I think has some validity, and others have taken our data and projected it to like a larger universe to come up with even more substantial numbers. But just on the people we've identified ourselves, we believe that that surpasses the margin of victory in enough states to have denied Joe Biden a win in the Electoral College. Without those three states, this election would have gone to the U.S. House of Representatives and President Trump would have been reelected. So we cannot say with confidence that Joe Biden's the deserved winner of the election based solely on the data that we've uncovered.
Yeah. Well, because of what is clear evidence of fraud throughout this election, this broadcast does not say President-elect Joe Biden. He's a former vice president, and right now, this is a nation that has decided to censor its president, corporate America, the owners of the national left-wing media, social media, big tech. And these are times, I think, the most perilous this country's faced in a very long time because of what has amounted to censorship of the chief executive of the government and clear evidence of fraud that authorities are not responding to forcefully. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I actually agree with you. And if the issues that I have brought up are not addressed, resolved by people in positions of authority to investigate them, that would be states' attorney generals or elsewhere, if Joe Biden is in fact inaugurated in January, I don't think you could honestly refer to him as president. I think you would have to just take the title or be recognized as the presidential occupant, not the president, because we have no confidence that he is the deserved winner of that election.
Yeah. Well, that's stunning research. The question, we've got 30 seconds. I'm going to ask it very quickly. Why in the world wouldn't the Republican Party be doing the research that you have done for the country? The Democratic Party as well, for that matter.
You know, not only is that a great question, the question is why aren't they doing it before Election Day? Because every bit of evidence that we produced was available before Election Day because all of the analysis we've done are on early and absentee voters. They could have been objecting to these ballots before they were stripped open and thrown in the pile. That's the real question. So we've got a lot of learning to do after this because we've made a lot of mistakes.
Well, we got a